Hey there. So, picture this. It's a crisp October afternoon in 1919, and you're packed into a buzzing stadium, or maybe huddled around a crackling radio. The World Series is on. The mighty Chicago White Sox, heavy favorites, are facing the Cincinnati Reds. But something's off. The game feels wrong. Star players are making errors that don't make sense. Pitches are suspiciously soft. A low, unsettling rumor begins to ripple through the crowd, through the entire country. What if they're losing on purpose? Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Underworld Kings, the rise and fall from Light Not Studios. Today, we're diving into one of the most infamous scandals in sports history, an event that shattered America's innocence about its favorite pastime. But we're not just talking about the 8 players who became known as the Black Sox. No, we're going behind them, to the shadowy figure who orchestrated the whole thing. The man who proved that the biggest crimes aren't committed on the field, but in quiet back rooms. This is episode 41, The Ice House King, how Arnold Rothstein fixed the 1919 World Series. Now, to understand Arnold Rothstein, you have to forget everything you think about gangsters. He wasn't some brash, gun-toting thug. He was a quiet, impeccably dressed businessman from a respectable Jewish family in New York. He had a mind for numbers, a cold, calculating demeanor, and an absolute genius for finding the angle in any situation. His nickname, the Brain, fit him perfectly. While others were brawling in the streets, Rothstein was pioneering organized crime as a corporate enterprise. Gambling was his specialty. He was the bank, the house that always won. And by 1919, he was already a millionaire, a kingpin whose influence reached into politics, the drug trade, and yes, the world of sports. So how does a man like that set his sights on the World Series? The opportunity, like most things in Rothstein's world, came down to a simple equation of greed and leverage. The Chicago White Sox owner, Charles Comiskey, was notoriously cheap. He underpaid his players, even though they were the best team in baseball. They were bitter, resentful, and crucially, vulnerable. The idea to throw the series didn't originate with Rothstein. It started with a small-time gambler and White Sox first baseman, Chick Gandhi, who whispered it to a friend of a friend. But word of a potential fix this big has a way of traveling upwards, through the underworld's grapevine, until it reaches the one man with the capital and the cold nerve to pull it off. When the proposal was brought to Rothstein, he didn't jump at it. That wasn't his style. He analyzed it. He reportedly sent his own men to Chicago to gauge the player's seriousness. He calculated the odds, the necessary bribes, the risk of exposure. He saw a system ripe for manipulation. In his mind, this wasn't a crime of passion, it was an arbitrage opportunity. The White Sox were expected to win. Betting against them, if you could ensure the outcome, was a financial masterstroke. After careful consideration, the Brain gave his quiet approval. He provided the financing, the crucial $80,000 in upfront money to secure the players' cooperation. But he insulated himself with layers of middlemen. He was the puppet master, making sure the strings couldn't be traced back to his well-manicured hands. The series itself was a bizarre spectacle. The White Sox played erratically. Pitcher Eddie Cicotte, who was in on the fix, famously hit the first Reds batter he faced, a prearranged signal to the gamblers that the fix was on. They lost the series, 5-3. And almost immediately, the whispers became shouts. The sports writers, led by the great Ring Lardner, knew something was rotten. But it took nearly a year for a grand jury investigation to begin. When it did, the players, offered immunity, confessed. They named names, and the public's heart broke. "Say it ain't so, Joe," a young fan famously pleaded to shoeless Joe Jackson. The 8 players were indicted. But during their 1921 trial, the signed confessions mysteriously vanished. They were acquitted. But the new baseball commissioner, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, banned them all for life, delivering a famous line: "Regardless of the verdict of juries, no player who throws a ball game will ever play professional baseball." Now, here's where the true crime element deepens. Throughout the investigation, all fingers eventually pointed to Arnold Rothstein. He was called to testify, and this is where his genius for criminality truly shone. On the stand, he was calm, collected, and utterly convincing. He portrayed himself as an honest businessman who had been approached about the fix, but had morally refused. He admitted knowing the gamblers involved, Of course, he was a gambler himself, but he framed the missing money as a loan, a business transaction he knew nothing about. He used his respectability as a shield. The jury and the public, desperate for a mastermind, wanted to believe the corruption was limited to the players. Rothstein, the elegant New Yorker, walked away unscathed. He had fixed the World Series, profited immensely from it, and faced zero legal consequences. It was the perfect crime. Reflecting on this from my own perspective, as someone who builds systems for a living, what chills me about Rothstein isn't the audacity, but the architecture. He saw a fragile system, baseball, with its underpaid players and rampant gambling. And he didn't just exploit a weakness, he engineered a failure. He applied a principle we know in tech and engineering: single points of failure. Comiskey's greed was one. The players' resentment was another. The lack of oversight was a third. Rothstein connected them all with the conductive wire of cash. And he did it with a detachment that feels very modern. He wasn't a fan who hated the game. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was purely transactional. In that way, Arnold Rothstein was America's first truly modern crime lord. He turned corruption into a business plan. The legacy of the 1919 fix is more than just 8 banned players and a stain on baseball. It was a wake-up call that led to the creation of the Commissioner's Office, a move to centralize authority and restore integrity. It proved that the greatest threat to an institution often comes not from outside, but from a calculated attack on its internal flaws. And for Arnold Rothstein, it cemented his legend. He returned to New York more powerful than ever, the king of the underworld, until his own life ended in a gambling dispute in 1928. But his blueprint, of insulation, of financing crimes you don't personally commit, of wearing a suit better than any armor, that blueprint is his real, lasting legacy. So the next time you watch a major sporting event, with its billion-dollar contracts and intense scrutiny, remember the shadow of 1919. Remember that the trust we place in the games we love was hard-won, forged in the fire of a scandal orchestrated from a quiet office by a man they called the Brain. The players were the fallen kings, but Arnold Rothstein, the Icehouse King sitting in the shadows, was the one who truly showed how the world could be rigged. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Underworld's playbook, please share this episode with someone who loves history, true crime, or sports. For more stories of the shadowy figures who shaped our world from the darkness, subscribe to Underworld Kings wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. This has been a Light Knot Studios production. You can find more of our work and discover our other shows at lightknotstudios.com. Until next time.